in Grimm?
Yeah.
At the beginning, they put me one time. It was about the 5th season. I mean, the 5th episode of the 1st season. They put me in the full, you know, makeup, and it took about 5.5 hours. And the reason they did it was because the guys doing the computer graphics imaging, the CGI, they were missing things, or they were, you know, there's 2 or 3 effects houses that work on the show. And so there are going to be variants from one house to the other. And so there's a lack of consistency, particularly, frankly, in my opinion, in the way I've looked through the show. Like, my morphed self has not been consistent, which I think is kind of a bummer, because they knew from the beginning that I was going to be like, you know, that the Blutbot was going to be like a major element, a major investment. So they were slow on the uptake there. So they put me in the full regalia, and they had me do a bunch of affect, you know, a bunch of behaviors on a green screen. And I think the idea was that they were going to then be able to kind of use that in various different stories. You know what I mean? They had me scared, they had me angry, they had me this, they had me do that. And I think they thought they were going to be able to use that. They wound up only using that in the opening credits. That is the full, I'm actually in stuff in the opening credits, but they realized they just can't. They can't do the physical. It takes too much time, and this is all digital now. The stuntmen, however, God bless them, they are in the real stuff, the latex. And they come in early, they get this stuff put on their faces, and they wait 8, 9, 10 hours to do 1 or 2 little pieces of a fight that I don't want to do or can't do or whatever. And those guys are really hard workers, because what happens is I'll morph and I'll have these tracking dots. I'll do that, and then I'll like cross off camera as if I'm going into the fight, and then they'll cut away, and 9 times out of 10 the cutaway will be to my stunt double in the makeup doing the fighting, and then they'll come back to me to kind of demorph out of the fight. So there are a lot of moving parts, but basically the full latex is only for the stunt doubles. Thank you.
Cheers.
Silas, you mentioned earlier about the story and getting into the story and being involved in it. And I grew up in the television age when story was the main thing, and the commercials were there to support the story.
Boy, oh boy.
And yes.
Tail is wagging the dog now, man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what Russell said. He said that the show is an advertisement for the commercials.
That's what's happening.
Because it used to be, you know, and I'm going to let you finish, but I'm jumping in here because it used to be a 60-minute show. There would be, you know, 2 minutes of commercials every 15 minutes or something. So you'd have what is that, the 8 minutes of commercials. And 40, whatever, my math is 52 minutes of show.
Yes.
And then it just kept going less and less and less and less. Now, literally, it's 42 minutes of programming and 18 minutes of commercials. So, I mean, it's just, it's the model of earning money through commercials has basically started to freeze out the artists, because it's just a network and the sponsors kind of doing this dance. And we're like, guys, we're the reason any of this is happening in the first place, but they're deaf to that. So,
yes, that's the point. And I've got a DVR system, and one of the things that I find that I'm doing, even with my favorite shows that I love to sit and watch live, I can't, because they'll start out in the beginning of the show, they'll give you a good 8-minute segment, and for the first half hour or so, they keep it light, and then toward the end, it's like 5 minutes of story and then 6 minutes of commercial, and it's so hard to keep up with the plot and remember what's going on.
If I could take what you're saying and put it in a bottle and take it to David, whatever his name is, Robert Greenblatt. Should know this. What's his name? Greenblatt?
Greenblatt.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Jesus, my mind. I'm sure they know this, but they don't care. I think that's the worst thing. They know that the fans are like, hey man, just give me some story, but they don't care because they need to make the money. So it's all about money, you know. But again, conventions like this and fans like you guys are what keep the ball in play as far as story. Because if it weren't for people who are really paying attention, you know, they would just be, you know, feeding us, you know, commercials and commercials and commercials. Although, I have to say, you know, the golden age of television, there's a lot to be said for that because there's some really good stuff being made. What we're talking about is network TV. It's not like this on cable. It's not as bad.
Okay, that was my question. Whether cable or...
I think network is really the worst.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. As far as the commercial dynamic.
I was wondering how a particular episode, the process from an episode, how many days do you read through?
We used to do a read-through where Big Brother would have a camera. They were so, oh boy, they were so insecure about us and about, you know, because there were no stars on the show. It's kind of a strange concept that in the first season, we would do read-throughs and they would have a camera. We would Skype read-throughs back to Burbank from Portland. So we would be in the middle of the workday, shooting an episode, and be like, okay, it's lunchtime, today we're gonna read the next episode. We would all go up to the offices and we would sit in a U-shaped table and there would be a camera in the middle and we would read the episode for them. And I don't begrudge them that on a certain level because the thing is happening in Portland and there's a lot of money on the table, but it felt at the time a little bit like, geez, really? Like, keeping your eye on us, huh? We only had to do that about 4 times, maybe 5, before they were like, okay. And they started seeing what we were doing, and they started looking at the stuff we were shooting, and they said, okay, you guys are doing something right, so we'll back off. But we have an 8-day shooting schedule, which, if it includes, sometimes it'll include 2 weekends. Like if day 1 is on a Friday, then day 2 is on a Monday, then you get to day 6, I guess, or 7 by Friday, and then day 8 will be the following Monday. So you could have, you know, an episode that lasts a long time, if it includes 2 weekends. Every episode includes at least 1 weekend. And we shoot very late Fridays. Normally, you start at 8 a.m. on Monday. You try to keep a 12-hour day, which means if you 8 to 8, but you always go over. So then you shoot 8 to 9 or 10, and then you can't start until 10 the next day. So by the end of the week, you're starting at noon and going till 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning on Friday. So that's kind of the rhythm of it. That's the actual shooting of it. And then there's a whole lot of post-production. And one of the reasons we premiere late is because they need to do a lot of work on the stuff, computer-wise and lighting-wise and all that business once we're finished actually shooting it. So there's shooting, there's editing, it's a juggernaut. Once the train leaves the station, it's just moving. And so any kind of sicknesses or delays, you got a producer who's a producer in Portland who has to deal with all that stuff. We've had it pretty smooth, I think, actually. But yeah, 8-day shooting schedule, and we shoot from July to April, so it's 9 months out of the year. Because we're still doing 22 a year, which is one of the rare, most places, most shows are doing the cable model, which is, 10 to 13. Thank you. Hey, Ralph.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks, man. It was nice chatting last night.
Yeah. So following up then on something you said last night. I just was curious about it. You were talking about how you might enjoy becoming a director, and you've already done some stage direction, you said. So in that light, if you were to go back to being a director, or if you take a project on in the future, would you be interested more so in doing stage direction, film, or television? And then if you could pick a project, is there anything, I know you're a big avid reader and you love movies, we were talking about that last night, any project you'd be interested in doing?
Yeah, you know, I will direct plays again, for sure. I'm doing a play in Portland at the Portland Center Stage at the end of this season with Sasha, who plays the captain. We're doing a play together. That's going to be really fun. I think Portland is going to be very excited about that. It's a cool play. So I will direct plays again. On what scale, I don't know. But I do want to get into directing because not only do I think I would be good at it and enjoy it, but I also think it's a way of career longevity. To have that in your pocket as a skill, you know, people think that, and I thought this, and to some extent it's true, that directing TV, you kind of just drop into this thing that already has its own momentum and the director doesn't really do anything. That's not really true. For all of the mechanization of TV production, which is highly mechanized, standardized, deadlines, every show has its own look, the director still has a lot to say. And they can either show up and phone it in and let the mechanism do the job, or they can actually be invested. And you can tell the difference. You can tell the difference between a director's episode who is invested, who is committed, who is talking to the actors, who's trying to find different ways to shoot it, and a director who's just like point and shoot and go home. And I think the type of project I'd like to do, I would like to get into TV direction only because I know it now so well from an actor's point of view that I think I would have a pretty good angle on that. Cinema is totally different. It's a totally different animal as far as the production mechanisms, and I don't know that as well because I've done much more TV than I have done cinema. So, and the type of project I'd like to do would be very actor-driven, just because I'm an actor. You know, I'd like to do something with, you know, 4 or 5 lead actors and something that's very human-based, but not like super heavy dark necessarily, but just something that's very human and probably a drama that has some comic elements to it. But I think directing comedy is a real unique skill. I mean, and you look at how comedy has kind of taken over the landscape in the last like 10 or 15 years with guys like Judd Apatow and you know, Steve Carell, and there's just like an enormous amount of comedy cinema right now. That, I think, is something I would not want to touch for a minute because I think it's really a particular skill. So probably start, you know, doing some plays and some TV and see if a movie is in me. You know, I don't know. Directing a film is like a real commitment, you know, and it's also a commitment to that field. I think you can maybe direct TV and still act. I don't know. But whatever I do, I'm going to keep acting until that train peters out. Thanks, man.